Here is another edition of my study guide. I hope the last one wasn't too bad, and if it was, I'll try and make this one better, but I'm not promising anything, so don't get your hopes up. Footnote 1. Country Idyll. After a brief prologue set in the 1980s, we meet Alice, Ruby's schizophrenic, frustrated great-grandmother. She has an out-of-body experience, after which she meets Jean-Paul Amond, the photographer, a caricature of a Frenchman. Characterization. Oddly enough, Ada is portrayed here as being somewhat psychotic, throwing a stone at her brothers who show mutual disgust at her behaviour. Although Ada is henceforth portrayed as a courageous saviour of her family and direct rival to the evil stepmother Rachel, it also foreshadows her other evil act in Bonnie Bird's, putting a chicken pox spot on her half-brother. Alice is portrayed, like Nell and Bunty, as being quite irritable and dissatisfied with her life. She's been living the wrong life, as Ruby does later in the novel, and regrets her marriage often, just as Bunty does. She's also portrayed as somewhat of an enigmatic figure, a woman lost in time. And it is true we are not as intimate and disapproving of her as with Bunty. She is possibly a more complex character than Bunty, being more morally grey, and at this point, having less revealed about her. Jean-Paul Amond, in his elaborate and eccentric ways, is almost a caricature of a Frenchman. Although as a piece of proleptic irony, Atkinson uses the quote, "When he returns with her photographs, he thinks he will ask her to run away with him. He is eccentric," to trick the reader. As although it seems like a throwaway line, it is in fact foreshadowing the fact that Alice will indeed run away with him, and it will change many lives in the process. Literary techniques, mate, innit? While this is the only footnote that has moments of Ruby's present day in it, all the footnotes temporal shift, as in shift back in time. This is the furthest the book goes back in time, to 1888, a week before Nell's birth. The bit in the present day is also a temporal shift to the future, as Ruby was not yet born in conception, and as she describes Alex's photograph taking place 100 years ago, this may well lead us to believe that a small moment in the present takes place around 1988, which is after any day in the main body of the book, apart from the last chapter. Emergency temporal shift! Intertextuality returns here, as many of the events in this chapter are in reference to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. The sequences of magical realism here, such as Alice floating in a forget-me-not blue sky some 30 feet above the cottage, are in reference to Carroll's very trippy novel. She's about to enter her own private wonderland. She explained in her Death of Bambi's Mother voice. He had a whiff of Edgar Allan Poe about him. The sun stands at midday, white-hot with anger. While the mystery of Pearl is the central mystery of the main chapters, the footnotes have a parallel mystery of Alice's death. In fact, Alice doesn't die until 1940, which isn't revealed until the very end of the book, in the footnote The Wrong Life. But here we get some slight foreshadowing. For example, Atkinson says this woman is about to slip out of her life, rather than this woman is about to die, indicating that there is more to it. When Alice is pulled inexorably back by the arrival of Jean-Paul Amond, it's clearly foreshadowing to his whisking her away, and considering the placing of the flash forward around 1988, 4 years before Bunty's death from Alzheimer's, Bunty's I Forgot seems to be foreshadowing her death. Themes of the novel. Frederick Barker, much like George, is a drunkard and a no-good husband, and Alice, like Bunty, regrets marrying for convenience. She longs to be rid of her wrong life. Not a day passes when Alice doesn't imagine what life would be like if she hadn't married Frederick Barker. Along with the theme of history and time, Atkinson is obsessed with objects that have relevance to the characters' lives and that follow them through time. Here we have the silver locket and the glass button. The theme is inspired by museums, and in particular Atkinson's dream about the Castle Museum in York coming to life. Ruby has this dream herself in the penultimate chapter of the novel. Atkinson plays around with perception here, as Ruby has always believed that the woman in the photograph was her great-grandmother, when in fact it was Rachel, the evil stepmother. The past is often open to misinterpretation. Ruby mentions that Alice's artificial sepia world, and how the photograph to her seems that way, but in reality it obviously isn't. The woman in the padded frame, the real mother, the true bride, gazes out inscrutably across time. Bunty says Alice looks just like you to Ruby, and later Ruby says that, in moments of stress, we will all, Nell, Bunty, my sister's me, brush our hand across our foreheads in the exact same way that Alice has just done. Atkinson also describes Ada's Madonna-like expression, which is something Bunty uses later on. All this is not just about the genetic similarities between the characters, but also the personality ones too. For example, Ruby, whose middle name turns out to be Alice, is the central point of the mystery, just as Alice is, and just like Alice, will escape an unhappy marriage. She even says she has been living the wrong life, which Ruby says much later on in the novel. Once again, Alice explores the difference between the imagined idealised reality, the tourist reality if you like, an expression I made up myself, so don't use it in exam, and the truth, which is something very close to this. No one would want to live in reality, and Alice would rather live in this hallucinogenic and tourist reality, as she discovers when she's floating in her world of hallucinogenic ideas. But like Alice and Ruby, we must always return to real life. Then suddenly, sound returns to the world. The whole effect is as if someone has taken an idyllic rural scene and set it slightly off-key. Here is the first time we hear about the dreaded angelic curls, which, aside from Pearl, every member of the Barker-Lennox family who dies early possesses. Ada and Albert, who are introduced here, are, apart from Gillian, perhaps the most significant family members to possess this. Links to the wife of Bath. The wife of Bath tricks men into marrying her, often for their money, by not showing them her true personality until they are married, something which Frederick Barker also does. This links to their shared theme of unhappiness within marriage. During his courting of Alice, Frederick struggled to show only his better side, but once he had secured her in marriage, he was relieved to be able to reveal the less savoury aspects of his character. I hope it wasn't too awful, but I'll probably get better over time. Unidentified voice signing out.